Today on Blue Values TV, find out about what the National Organization for Women is doing right here in the state of California. Stay tuned. Welcome to Blue Values TV. Blue Values TV is a production of the Blue Values Coalition, a nonprofit organization dedicated to informing, educating, and engaging our neighbors in the governance of our communities. Look for us online at www.bluevaluescoalition.org. I'm very honored to have as our guest today Patricia Bellasalma.
Mm-hmm.
May I call you Patricia or Patty?
Patty's fine.
Patty?
Yeah.
Patty is the president of the California National Organization for Women. She's got a wonderful history. She was named earlier in the 2000s as Ms. Magazine Woman of the Year. She's an attorney in the state of California and has been very active in rights for not only women but for many groups of individuals for many years. Thank you, Patty, for joining us today. Very happy to have you here.
I'm happy to be here today.
So we're going to have a conversation today about what is the status of women in California and in this country right now, and what do we need to do going forward. You know, a lot of us think that because we live in California, we really are in a great situation. We don't have much to worry about. What is the situation on the rights of women in the state of California right here?
Well, relatively speaking, you know, we're a lot better off than Texas or Mississippi or Louisiana, who's today is just enacted a draconian anti-abortion law. But California has a long way to go before we actually see women taking their rightful places as equals throughout this society. So and because California is usually the vanguard, the leader in moving us forward, we've been concentrating on going that next step and taking up Hillary Clinton's challenge to enter the participation age and to advocate and agitate until the state of California and every local government entity starts to truly implement gender equity throughout the system.
Now, there's a few issues that are out there that affect women in California and the rest of the country that are getting a lot of press lately. The Affordable Care Act has been implemented. Now, it's got a lot of benefits. We're seeing numbers now close to $7 million. 7 million people are expected to sign up by the end of March, which was yesterday. But it doesn't fix everything.
No.
And there's some limitations in the Affordable Care Act. Do you want to talk about the limitations in that act right now?
Yes, we're a strong believer in healthcare for all, and to have a single pay source that's not tied to an employer, which has its own set of problems, going way beyond portability. The Affordable Care Act is a step in the right direction. You know, it's a step we had to take, but we are fine-tuning it, fixing it, and as our coalition says, we're putting patient protection and affordable access at the center in this state's implementation. We're not quite there yet, but we're making sure that people have an equal voice to the insurance company lobby as well as the healthcare provider lobby, which is enormous in Sacramento. It's basically taken over or taken the place of oil.
I understand a lot of Catholic organizations are taking over hospitals in increasing numbers. What's
Yes.
the problem with that?
Well, one of the main mechanisms for cost containment and I'll say alleged quality is the accountable care organizational system, which is it's like a Kaiser on steroids. You know, instead of just it's a soup to nuts horizontal and vertical healthcare organization. You know, from nursing homes to urgent care clinics to hospitals to doctors networks, all owned by one entity. And then they all have to connect and are responsible for the patient's care. And outside of political medicine, you could get some efficiencies and quality controls into that system. But when you are talking about Catholic accountable care organizations, you have if you want to be able to control how you die, with even the amount of pain medication, if you're part of a Catholic accountable care organization, you lose that right.
Now, just last week, the Supreme Court heard arguments in the case that Hobby Lobby has brought forward. Hobby Lobby, if you can describe the case and what it's about, that would be really great.
Well, the Hobby Lobby case is mind-boggling. It is a business corporation that sells hobby toys. And so it has public shares. It is not a closely held private corporation. It is not it is a public corporation with shareholders. Yet they're claiming that not only can an individual hold a religious view, but shareholders can.
As collectively,
and then be able to use that that collective belief in both for their employees, and I'm assuming that because if you follow the logic, it would be to who they sell to as well. There isn't any line there. Once you and if the Supreme Court establishes that a corporation has it's hard to even say they have a religious belief in which they have a right to protect and exercise, then every discrimination law on the books is gone. It's out the window. And
so it was similar to that, I believe it was an Arizona case where a photographer refused to photograph a gay couple because they believed that homosexuality was immoral. And so that brought up the question, well, are they right in asserting that religious belief, or is it a case of discrimination against people because of religious, because of sexual orientation?
Yes, well, the last time I checked, I don't think there's anything in "Thou shalt be a photographer" and go out and and proselytize through commercial services. That's where the line has always been drawn. Like we have you're in this country. You're allowed and protected in every manner your ability to privately hold beliefs, but the moment that you go out into the world, your beliefs can only go to as John Stuart Mill has written, your freedom stops at the bridge of my nose, and that's how people of different beliefs can live together in peace.
Right.
And we're talking about breaking down that fundamental social pact. We'll be back to segregated housing and lunch counters.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there isn't. We're finally getting honesty from the people who have been putting these laws out that it isn't confined to the LGBT community. This is
right.
like wanting to roll back and say, if I have the power and if I have if I'm part of the dominant, I can the dominant majority. I can do whatever I want.
That's right. That's right. So it's hard to imagine that this could be anything other than a very broad ruling. It's very hard to imagine how you could constrain this to a very specific argument. And I think that's one of the things the Supreme Court is facing right now, is how to rule on this thing in any kind of a narrow manner at all. It has implications, as you say, not only on employees, but also on customers, because customers may no longer be able to use certain organizations. Would pretty drastically change our society at a very basic level.
And also introducing again, because this idea, because the whole idea about an employer being able to tell you what you could buy with your compensation, where's the line about your wages?
Right.
Because that isn't the employer's health insurance, right? That was earned by the employee. So we've just created the system that instead of wages, and then the employee buying the health insurance, we created the employer gets it for all of the employees as part of the compensation package.
Right.
If the employer, basically as a master, gets to dictate what kinds of products within healthcare you are going to be allowed to use with your wages, where's the legal line? Where's the logical line that employer isn't going to be able to tell you, well, I don't want you buying this kind of housing in this area, or this food, or this whatever. It's a very scary kind of world that they're advocating for. That the moment that you walk in, instead of you as a human being being born free, equal in dignity and rights, you don't give that up just simply because you have reached an agreement to use your body and your labor towards a joint effort in whether it's servicing and selling hobby toys or building a car or whatever it is. You don't lose your humanity.
Right.
And your ability to agree and disagree. It was just like, all that is an employer and employee relationship is I am exchanging, my time and effort, and you're going to give me, X amount of compensation for that.
Right.
That doesn't give them any right to lord over me.
Right.
And
right.
and that's what basically Hobby Lobby is asserting.
Yeah. So the mantra that we had been hearing for a while on the Affordable Care Act is, do you really want the government to be between you and your doctor? And now the argument is becoming, well, do you want your employer to be between you and your doctor, dictating what kinds of coverage you can and cannot have? And so, understandably, the National Organization for Women is opposed to that kind of an argument and is opposed to that suit. That's going to be a very interesting case to see.
Yes, and whether we, as individuals, because there's a lot of cases coming up in June for women, and clinic access, whether there's going to be buffer zones, whether we're going to be going back to the days where we're going to have to do clinic defense.
Right.
This is it's a new generation of women. I hope it doesn't occur, but if we have a Supreme Court that basically says that the First Amendment rights of terrorists come before your fundamental rights to be equal, as well as to have to control your body, I think you're going to see women not paying attention to the laws of this country any longer.
Pretty scary case. Now, the National Organization for Women is involved with more than just health care and reproductive rights and rights over their own bodies. They're also very heavily involved in making sure that they get equal pay and that we basically have equal opportunities for women and compensation for women. It's almost impossible, I imagine, in your organization to separate the ideologies from the politics. In other words, there seems to be a political divide. Well, we all know there's a political divide in this country. How is it, or do you see a divide also on how different parties stand on the rights of women?
Well, it's fascinating because it's the ideology and the parties don't necessarily stay separate.
Right.
It's like we have Ron Unz right now, who is out gathering signatures for a statewide minimum wage to start right now instead of in 2016, like the
the California
legislature
law
just did.
Raises it to $9 an hour starting in 2015 and $10 an hour in 2016. So this measure would actually increase it right away.
Yes, and Ron Unz is a conservative Republican.
Yeah.
And you go, well, how is that possible? But when you look at the tenets of a true fiscal conservative, the corporations, employers aren't supposed to be freeloading off of government subsidies so that they have an unfair advantage over other employers that pay their employees a living wage.
You've been involved pretty heavily in that recently in the case against Walmart, superstores and stuff. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes, I mean, we were a few votes short on the bill that would have made Walmart have to not be able to use the deploy of part-time workers to be able to avoid buying healthcare insurance, and that's the danger, right? We had a super majority.
That's right.
And we had Democrats walk away. That's how much money is in Sacramento, and it is big money is a huge problem. But as every organizer that's come before us, organized people will beat organized money every single time.
So this is shocking. You're saying that big money can corrupt both political parties, or all political parties.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I'm only kidding. That's not that big a surprise. Now, speaking of that, I understand from your website and your blogs that you are taking positions on certain candidates that are running for statewide office. Let's talk about a couple of those. There was a pretty lengthy blog, serious blog, where you basically claim that John Perez, who's running for state controller, is not fit to be state controller. Can you elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, yes, it is a very serious matter when we have tried in this state unsuccessfully to put campaign finance reform at the center of how California does business. We have the weakest campaign finance and ethics laws in the country.
In California?
Yeah.
That's amazing.
The weakest. So there's and the little bit that we were successful in getting passed and enacted, John Perez created a basic loophole around it, and he uses the assembly members to create huge war chests of funds, and then distributes them as he sees fit.
Mm-hmm.
And
kind of like a power broker, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
And that's wrong, whether you agree with the decisions that he made or not. We have though also seen at this with that loophole means who's writing those checks, right? So we've seen healthcare industrial complex writing huge checks to every single assembly member because it then flushes through and gathers up and provides money to go against in this now open primary system
Mm-hmm.
against progressive Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing more and more chamber financed Democratic candidates going up against community organizers and other types of
More progressive
Democrats
Mm-hmm.
that are tied to their communities and their issues. So yes, I'm not a fan of John Perez's ability to finance his run for state office through corporate big money.
So basically, let's just run through a couple of endorsements
Mm-hmm.
that the National Organization for Women have made. We just talked about the state controller race. The endorsed candidate for that is
Betty Yee.
Mm-hmm. And for Secretary of State, Leland Yee, I believe, is dropping out because of this
Mm-hmm.
being arrested. The endorsed candidate there,
Alex Padilla.
Alex Padilla.
Mm-hmm.
And for governor, have you endorsed a candidate yet?
We will not be endorsing a candidate.
Okay, so you have chosen to not endorse any candidate for governor.
Correct.
Lieutenant governor?
We have chosen to re-endorse Gavin.
Gavin Newsom.
Mm-hmm.
That's
And of course Kamala Harris.
Kamala Harris for Attorney General.
And yes, and one of our favorite statewide elected officials outside of Kamala is Dave Jones, the insurance.
Dave Jones for Insurance Commissioner.
Yeah, and we're fully on board and have endorsed his initiative.
This is the initiative that would bring healthcare insurance companies under the purview of the insurance commissioner?
Well, yes, small and individual and small group policies. Mm-hmm. He would finally have the authority to regulate rates.
Regulate rates, right. Mm-hmm. Is that initiative scheduled to be on the ballot?
In for November 20.
This year?
This year, yeah.
Okay, so that's something else for us to look forward
Mm-hmm.
to this year. Safe to say, your biggest enemy, from what I hear from you, is the influence of big money in politics. That's really what you have been arguing about and arguing against, is big money is having a really undue influence in politics today. Citizens United decision by the Supreme Court certainly played a part in that. Where do we go from here on that whole influence of big money?
We just got to keep organizing. We've been here before. The turn of the century, we used to have senators that would stand up and go, "I vote for Standard Oil," and I'm sure we're going to get to that place too. We're only about an inch away. But here, it's an interesting thing because we always kind of concentrate on campaign contributions. That's not really where the big money is.
No.
The big money is in actually paying for government now. It's the public-private partnerships and the taking whole swaths of what was done by public workers and is now being done by nonprofits paid for by the industries in which they either regulate or produce policy papers. We have this system, and particularly in healthcare, where at not just the state level, but at local government levels, and even in school districts, we have the healthcare foundations writing tens of millions of dollars to actually implement programs. And how can anybody stay with a straight face that doesn't influence how they vote on healthcare issues?
Yeah, it's also in education. We have Common Core programs and stuff which are strongly supported by certain corporations in the United States. So corporate money and big private money is having a huge influence in all of politics today on basically every issue that's out there. What other issues would you like people to know about and to do something about?
Well, they're all kind of related. We're part of Raising California Together Coalition, which is working very hard to get early childhood education fully funded. We don't have a governor that believes that children develop. He kind of thinks that they kind of like appear in kindergarten from some magical place.
So you're recommending more preschool education?
Yeah, the whole First 5 agenda we need to do. I mean, it's just like we spend so much money on the back end, and that's money, which pales in comparison to the human tragedy of not fully caring for our children and their families. They should be first, not last.
I know our president has also advocated for more preschool education. I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure.
This has been a pleasure talking with you. Marvelous issues, and I think you find support for those issues, not just amongst women, but amongst all of us. This is all things that we can all believe in. Until next time, I want to thank you all for joining us on Blue Values TV. Until next time, good night.